Blue lightning cut through the air around Mace Windu as he felt his body being hurled through the Chancellor's office window. The icy wind from the heights of Coruscant lashed his face as he plummeted in free fall, watching the city lights become blurs before his eyes. Without his right hand and with a throbbing pain rising through his arm as he fought to maintain consciousness. The purple lightsaber, his trademark for so many years, had fallen into the abyss of the planet city, lost forever in the depths. Windu closed his eyes for a brief moment, concentrating on the Force, feeling it flow through every cell of his wounded body. He couldn't die like this, not while the Sith Lord was still alive, not while the Republic still needed him. With a monumental effort, he extended his left arm, using the Force to direct his fall. The platform of a civilian vehicle appeared below him like an unexpected lifeline. Windu channeled all his remaining energy to cushion the impact, making his body spin in the air while the Force guided him. The landing was brutal even so, his bones protesting against the shock as he rolled over the cold metal of the platform. The droid driver emitted a confused beep, its sensors detecting something unusual, but Windu was already rolling off the vehicle before any alarm could be triggered. He fell heavily onto a side walkway. The city continued its frantic routine around him, thousands of beings oblivious to the tragedy that had just unfolded in the upper levels. Windu tried to stand, but his legs failed, and darkness began to surround his vision. He needed to alert the other masters about Palpatine, about the betrayal that had happened right under their noses. Trying to drag himself, Windu searched in his tunic for any communication device, but his trembling fingers found nothing but torn and burned fabric from the Force lightning. The city lights began to dance before his eyes, and he felt his body becoming heavier, as if Coruscant's own gravity had increased tenfold. He fought against unconsciousness, but it was a battle he couldn't win, and the darkness finally swallowed him completely. When Mace Windu finally opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was the corroded metal ceiling of some kind of improvised facility. His entire body ached, a symphony of pain that echoed from every muscle and bone. He tried to move his right arm instinctively and felt something different, the weight of metal and circuits where there had once been flesh and bone. An old model medical droid was beside him, its sensors blinking softly as it monitored his vital signs. Windu tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness forced him to remain lying down, his body still recovering from the trauma. The room was small and cramped, with obsolete medical equipment piled in the corners and the smell of synthetic bacta in the air. He could sense through the Force that time had passed, more time than he would like to admit. The room door opened with a metallic creak, and a middle-aged man entered, his eyes widening at seeing Windu awake. He was an ordinary human, with the worn clothes of a worker from the lower levels of Coruscant, but there was something gentle in his brown eyes. He approached slowly, as if fearing to startle the Jedi Master, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Jedi Master, you're awake," he said in a soft voice, a slight accent from the core worlds coloring his words. "My name is Dallin. I found you 2 days ago, bleeding on a walkway near my workplace. I recognized you from holographic transmissions before everything changed." Windu tried to speak, but his throat was as dry as the sands of Tatooine, and only a hoarse sound came out. Dallin quickly grabbed a glass of water and helped Windu drink, holding his head carefully. "The prosthetic," Windu finally managed to say, his voice recovering some of its natural authority despite the weakness. Dallin nodded, looking at the mechanical hand he had installed on the Jedi Master's arm. "Sorry if it's not the best work. I'm just a maintenance technician, not a medical specialist. But I've worked with prosthetics before, and I couldn't let you die there. The Jedi always protected people like me, even when no one else cared." He seemed to hesitate for a moment before continuing. "Master Windu, there's something you need to know. While you were unconscious, things changed out there. Chancellor Palpatine declared that the Jedi tried to seize power, that they were traitors. There are clone troops everywhere, hunting any Jedi who are left. The Republic, it doesn't exist anymore. Now it's an empire." Dallin's words hit Windu like a punch in the stomach, and he closed his eyes, feeling the weight of defeat on his shoulders. Mace Windu sat up slowly on the improvised bed, testing his new mechanical hand while processing the terrible news. Rage began to boil within him, a burning fury against Palpatine, against himself for not seeing the truth earlier. He could feel the dark side trying to infiltrate his thoughts, whispering promises of revenge. But Windu was a master of Vapad, the seventh form of combat that he himself had perfected. He closed his eyes and began to channel these dark emotions, transforming them into pure energy through the ancestral technique. Vapad was a dangerous dance on the edge of the abyss where he could use the darkness without being consumed by it. He let the rage flow through him and then dissipate, transformed into cold and clear determination that he would need to survive. "Dallin, do you have access to long-range communications?" Windu asked, his mind already working on a plan. The technician nodded and pointed to an old console in the corner of the room. "I have a smuggler's communicator. It's not traceable through Imperial channels." Windu walked to the console, his fingers dancing over the controls as he tried to establish contact with Yoda through encrypted Jedi frequencies. But there was no response, only the cold silence of space. He tried other council masters, but the result was always the same. Finally, on an emergency frequency, he heard a familiar voice. "Who is on this frequency? Identify yourself." It was Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Windu felt a wave of relief. "Kenobi, it's me, Mace Windu. I'm alive." The silence lasted so long that Windu thought the connection had been lost. "Mace, you're alive? We thought you had died in the Chancellor's office. But how? Where are you?" Obi-Wan finally responded, his voice full of disbelief. Windu decided that his location wasn't important. "That doesn't matter now. Where are you, Kenobi? We need to reunite, organize a response. Palpatine cannot win like this." Obi-Wan hesitated before responding, his voice heavy with weariness. "I'm on Tatooine, Mace." Windu spent the next few minutes listening as Obi-Wan told about Order 66, about how the clones had turned against the Jedi. He heard about Mustafar, about how Anakin Skywalker had fallen to the dark side and how Obi-Wan had been forced to face him. "I left him there, Mace. He was burning. Anakin is dead." The words fell on Windu like heavy stones. "Kenobi, listen to me carefully," Windu said, his voice recovering the authority of a council master. "We need to organize a counterattack. If we can reach Palpatine, we can end this before his empire consolidates. Gather all the surviving Jedi you can." But Obi-Wan's response was not what he expected. "No, Mace, it's impossible. There aren't enough Jedi. Even Master Yoda gave up and went into exile. The Jedi Order is finished." The resignation in Kenobi's voice infuriated Windu. "A frontal attack may be impossible," Windu admitted, forcing his voice to remain calm. "But we can infiltrate. You and I, maybe a few more. We can reach Palpatine and eliminate him. Without him, the Empire will collapse." Obi-Wan sighed deeply. "I can't, Mace. I have responsibilities here." Windu slammed his fist on the console. "What responsibilities? Explain yourself." There was a pause. "Come here. I need to show you something." When he arrived on Tatooine, Windu found Kenobi living in a modest cave in the Junlan Wastes. They embraced briefly, two survivors sharing a moment of connection. "You look terrible, Obi-Wan," Windu said. "You're not exactly at your best either, Mace," Kenobi responded with a ghost of his smile. Windu told his story about the confrontation with Palpatine, about how Anakin had interfered at the crucial moment. "Skywalker betrayed us. He chose Palpatine. I should have trusted my instincts about him." Obi-Wan shook his head sadly. "So you understand why we need to act," Windu pressed. "Together, we might have a chance." But Obi-Wan was shaking his head. "I can't, Mace. I have a responsibility here that might be a real new hope." Windu felt his frustration grow. What responsibility? From the elevated point where the cave was located, Windu followed Obi-Wan's gaze across the rocky valley. In the distance, partially obscured by the heat distorting the air, there was a moisture farmer's property. Obi-Wan extended a pair of binoculars to him, and Windu adjusted them to focus on the distant scene. A young woman was outside the dwelling, holding a baby in her arms while talking to an older man. Even from a distance, Windu could sense the pure innocence emanating from that small life. "Luke Skywalker, his name," Obi-Wan said softly beside Windu. "Son of Anakin and Padme. She died in childbirth, but the twins survived. The sister is safe with Senator Organa in Alderaan. Luke is here under the protection of Anakin's family, and I need to stay to ensure he grows up safely. He is a new hope for the Order, Mace. When the time is right, I will train him." Windu lowered the binoculars slowly, processing this unexpected revelation. Anakin had left descendants, children who carried the potential of the Force at probably extraordinary levels. The irony was bitter, almost cruel. The man who had helped destroy the Jedi could have children who might one day restore the Order. He returned the binoculars to Obi-Wan and nodded with understanding. "Very well. Someone must stay to protect the boy and preserve our teachings. I respect your choice." A pause weighed between them before Windu asked the question he already knew the answer to. "Where is Master Yoda?" Obi-Wan pointed to the stars beginning to appear in the evening sky. "Dagobah." He isolated himself completely there, meditating on his failures. Windu was already calculating the route before Obi-Wan finished speaking. The farewell between the two masters was brief but loaded with unspoken meaning. They knew they might never see each other again, that each one's path now diverged completely. Obi-Wan would remain as a silent guardian, while Windu would pursue direct action. Neither choice was nobler than the other, just different responses to the same devastating trauma. Windu departed from Tatooine that same night, his small and discreet ship disappearing into the stars toward the coordinates that Obi-Wan had provided. Landing on the swampy planet was a challenge in itself, with the surface being mainly stagnant water and dense vegetation. Windu found a clearing firm enough to land and began his search on foot, guiding himself through the Force to Yoda's presence. After a few minutes of walking, he finally found a simple hut built near a tranquil lagoon. Yoda was sitting outside, his eyes closed in deep meditation. He didn't open his eyes when Windu approached, but his familiar voice echoed nonetheless. "Survived, Mace Windu has. Surprised, I am not. Strong in the Force, you always were." Windu knelt respectfully before the Grand Master, but his words were urgent and challenging. The conversation that followed was a clash of philosophies between two of the most powerful Jedi who ever lived. Yoda argued that the age of the Jedi had come to an end, that they had failed in their mission to maintain balance and now needed to accept this reality. Windu counter-argued that accepting defeat without fighting was contrary to everything the Jedi represented, that there was still a chance to eliminate the Sith before his empire became unshakable. The discussion extended through the night, with Yoda citing ancient wisdom and Windu appealing to the need for immediate action. "Confronted Sidious, I did. Too powerful, he is. Alone, defeat him we cannot," Yoda insisted. But Windu persisted, reminding him that together they represented centuries of combined experience, that a careful infiltration could achieve what brute force had not. Slowly, through hours of debate, Windu saw resolution begin to form in Yoda's ancient eyes. When the sun rose over the swampy planet, Yoda finally agreed. It wasn't an enthusiastic agreement, but rather the acceptance of a final duty that needed to be fulfilled before the old master could truly rest. They returned together to Windu's ship, Yoda casting a final look at his simple hut as if he knew he might not return. The journey back to Tatooine was silent, each master lost in his own thoughts about what was to come. When they arrived at Obi-Wan's cave, they set up a secure hologram to establish communication with Senator Bail Organa on Alderaan. Organa's worried face appeared in the bluish projection, his eyes widening at seeing 3 Jedi Council members still alive. Windu presented the plan with military clarity. They would infiltrate the Imperial ship where Palpatine was overseeing his new weapon under construction, the Death Star, and eliminate him directly. Windu's ship landed again near Obi-Wan's cave, raising clouds of golden sand that gleamed under Tatooine's twin suns. Yoda descended the ramp with slow but determined steps, his staff tapping on the rocky ground as he walked alongside Windu toward the cave entrance. Obi-Wan awaited them, and his expression changed from surprise to something close to contained hope at seeing the Grand Master there. The three masters entered the cave and settled in a circle on simple cushions that Obi-Wan had improvised. Windu went straight to the point, explaining that Yoda had agreed to carry out a final mission against the Emperor. The atmosphere in the cave was dense with the weight of what was to come, each of them aware that this could be the last meeting between the last members of the High Jedi Council. Yoda remained in contemplative silence, his fingers intertwined on his lap as he observed the two younger masters. Obi-Wan prepared the holographic communication equipment he kept hidden for emergencies, adjusting the frequencies until he got a secure connection with Alderaan. The flickering image of Bail Organa appeared projected above the device, the senator clearly surprised to see three council members gathered. Windu took the lead in the conversation, detailing the infiltration plan he had conceived during his journey to the swampy planet. They would use Organa's contacts to obtain access to an authorized maintenance pod, approach the Imperial ship during a shift change when surveillance would be more relaxed, and eliminate Palpatine before he could react or call for reinforcements. Yoda added tactical observations based on his knowledge of Sidious's combat style, explaining that they would need to attack simultaneously to prevent the Sith Lord from using Force lightning against them separately. Organa listened with growing concern, but agreed to provide the necessary resources and coordinate the political response. Through the hologram, Organa outlined his part in the plan with the precision of an experienced statesman. He would maintain constant contact with senators loyal to the Old Republic, those who had voted against the formation of the Empire or who secretly regretted their decision. The moment he received confirmation of Palpatine's death, Organa would convene an emergency Senate session on Alderaan, far from Coruscant where the Imperial presence was massive. He would present evidence of Sith manipulation and argue for the immediate dissolution of the Empire and restoration of the Republic under new leadership. It would be risky, with a high chance of arrest or execution if the plan failed, but Organa was willing to take that risk. "You will not be alone in this fight," he said through the hologram, his voice firm and resolute. "There are many of us who never truly accepted this empire, who were only waiting for the right moment to act. You will give us that moment." Windu thanked the senator for his courage, knowing that politicians willing to risk everything for principles were rare in any era. The final details were settled during the following hours, each contingency considered and planned. Organa would provide the access credentials and technician clothes through a contact at a neutral space station where Yoda and Windu would make a stop before heading to the Imperial ship. He would also keep a small fleet of loyal ships in a state of readiness near Alderaan, ready to respond in case the mission was successful and he needed to quickly establish control over key systems. Obi-Wan would map alternative escape routes that the two masters could use if they needed to retreat quickly, although everyone knew that the chance of escape after a confrontation with Sidious was minimal. When Organa's hologram finally disconnected, the three Jedi remained seated in the cave as Tatooine's suns began to set on the horizon. They meditated together one last time, their presences in the Force intertwined in perfect harmony, each drawing strength from the presence of the others. When darkness fell completely over the desert, Yoda and Windu stood up, said goodbye to Obi-Wan with silent but deep embraces, and walked back to the ship that would take them on their final mission against the darkness that had consumed the galaxy. The infiltration began hours later, when Yoda and Windu approached the massive Imperial ship in a small maintenance pod that Organa had obtained through his remaining contacts. The partially constructed structure of the Death Star floated like a mechanical moon beside the Imperial command ship, both surrounded by dozens of Star Destroyers and fighters. Windu piloted with precision while Yoda suppressed their presences in the Force, making them practically invisible to any Sith Sentinel. They docked in an external maintenance bay and entered the ship wearing stolen Imperial technician uniforms. The corridors were cold and metallic, filled with hurried officers and stormtroopers marching in formation. Each step took them deeper into the heart of darkness, closer to the man who had destroyed everything they loved. The Imperial guards positioned on the ship's upper levels presented more of a challenge, but nothing that two Jedi Masters couldn't overcome. Using mind tricks to confuse some and precise strikes to the neck to neutralize others, Yoda and Windu advanced methodically. They left the unconscious guards hidden in storage compartments, ensuring that the alarm would not be raised prematurely. The Emperor's throne room was located at the top of the ship, protected by layers of security that would have been impenetrable to anyone less experienced. But they were not just anyone. They were warriors who had dedicated combined centuries to mastery of the Force. The final doors opened with a hydraulic hiss, revealing a circular hall bathed in red shadows. In the center of the room, illuminated by floating holograms showing construction progress on the Death Star, was Emperor Palpatine on his elevated throne. But what made both Jedi stop in their tracks was the figure kneeling before the throne. A completely sealed black armor covered a body that seemed more machine than living being. The mechanical, rhythmic breathing echoed through the hall like a harbinger of death. The figure didn't turn when they entered, remaining in a position of submission before his master. Palpatine, however, opened his yellow eyes and smiled with cruel satisfaction. "Mace Windu, you survived your fall. How persistent you are." His voice was like poison dripping over metal. Yoda stepped forward, his lightsaber already ignited with brilliant green light. "End here, your empire will." The confrontation exploded into instant action. Palpatine rose from his throne in a fluid movement impossible for someone of his fragile appearance, his fingers already channeling violet rays of Sith energy. Yoda leaped to meet him, his strikes too fast for ordinary eyes to follow. The black-armored figure rose and ignited a red saber, finally turning to face Windu. There was something disturbing about those movements, something familiar but distorted. Windu activated his own purple saber and assumed the Vapad stance, allowing the darkness of the room to flow through him and become strength. The black-armored warrior attacked, but his movements were heavy, clumsy, much slower than they should be for someone with such a presence in the Force. Windu easily blocked the initial strikes, analyzing his opponent's combat style. There was something terribly familiar about those attacks. The ferocity was there, the raw aggressiveness that characterized Form V, but it lacked the speed and fluidity that Windu would instantly recognize. He pressed his advantage, forcing the Black Warrior to retreat under a sequence of fast and precise strikes. During a particularly desperate defense, Windu's saber slid along the side of the black helmet, cutting through a section of the mask and revealing burned and disfigured skin underneath. For a fraction of a second, Windu saw a human eye through the opening, a yellow eye glowing with Sith hatred, but there was something in that destroyed face that made his blood freeze. He knew those features, even mutilated beyond recognition. "Skywalker," Windu whispered with mixed horror and fury. "You traitor, you survived." The revelation energized Vader with renewed rage. He advanced with a cry distorted by the damaged mask, but his fury made him careless. Windu channeled all his connection with Vapad, transforming Vader's darkness into a weapon against himself. In a sequence of movements executed with deadly perfection, Windu disarmed Vader, cutting off his right mechanical hand and sending the red saber flying across the room. Before Vader could recover his balance, Windu spun low and cut through the left leg just above the knee. Vader fell heavily, his mechanical breathing becoming irregular and desperate. On the other side of the room, the confrontation between Yoda and Palpatine reached its devastating climax. The Emperor launched continuous waves of violet lightning, his face contorted in fury as he channeled decades of accumulated hatred through his twisted fingers. Yoda spun and leaped with impossible agility for someone of his apparent age, his green saber blocking some lightning while dodging others with millimetrically precise movements. The Sith energy illuminated the entire room with intermittent flashes that created dancing shadows on the metallic walls. Palpatine intensified his attack, concentrating all his energy into a single massive beam of Force lightning that should have incinerated any living being. But Yoda planted his feet firmly on the ground, extended his free hand and began to absorb the energy directly, his small body glowing with power as electricity ran over his skin without causing damage. Palpatine's eyes widened in shock and terror as he realized his opponent had mastered a technique that few Jedi in history had managed to execute. Yoda redirected all that energy back against its creator in a blinding explosion that hurled the Emperor against his own throne with crushing force. Palpatine tried to stand, his robes burned and smoking, but Yoda was already upon him, his green saber tracing a gleaming arc through the air. The blade cut cleanly through the Sith Lord's neck, separating the head from the body in a single stroke executed with absolute precision. The head rolled across the metal floor as the body collapsed, dark energy leaking from it like toxic smoke before dissipating completely in the air. Yoda approached slowly, watching fallen Vader trying to drag himself with his remaining left hand toward his lost saber. Windu raised his purple blade in execution position, but hesitated for a brief moment. He saw Yoda watching with a deeply sad expression, the Grand Master's ancient eyes reflecting centuries of wisdom and compassion. But Windu knew what needed to be done. The strike was quick and merciful, the purple blade cutting through Vader's exposed neck and separating the helmeted head from the body. "He is too dangerous to be left alive," Windu declared, his voice firm but without satisfaction. Yoda closed his eyes briefly, a single tear running down his wrinkled face. Skywalker, already dead, was. The two masters stood in silence in the now quiet hall, surrounded by the bodies of their enemies, victorious but without any sense of triumph. Windu activated his communicator and sent the agreed signal to Bail Organa. "The Emperor has fallen. Restore the Republic." In the months that followed, the Senate was convened again under the leadership of Organa and other senators loyal to the Old Republic. The truth about Palpatine's manipulation was revealed through evidence recovered from Imperial archives. The Clone Order was dissolved, and the few Jedi who had survived began to emerge from their hiding places. Yoda, Windu, and Obi-Wan formed a new temporary council, working to rebuild the Jedi Order on more solid foundations, learning from the mistakes of the past. Luke Skywalker was brought from Tatooine, along with his sister Leia from Alderaan as children, both receiving training from an early age under the direct supervision of the three masters. The galaxy slowly began to heal from its wounds, but the scars of war and betrayal would remain for generations as dark reminders of the price of arrogance and the failure to recognize the darkness growing in the shadows.